Hello, everyone. I'm Victor Manibo, a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office, and you are watching the AM show, Wang Law Office's question and answer show.
Hi, my name is Ariel. I'm the host, also a senior paralegal at Law Office. Our show going to start every Friday at 11 a.m. EST, 8 a.m. PST.
Here at the AM show, Ariel and I do a question and answer about hot immigration topics or immigration issues and questions that have been sent to us by the viewers via our platforms, Line, YouTube, or email, and we collect them all into one specific topic every week. Now, this week, we are going to talk about marriage fraud. We've talked about it in the context of other topics in the past, but now we're really going to take a look at just marriage fraud in particular. What is it? What do you do when you have been accused of it? And why is it such a big deal to immigration, right? There are a lot of people who are interested in this, so I'm excited to get into it.
Yes, before we start, Victor, can you introduce a little bit on your own background?
Sure. For those who haven't met me yet, again, my name is Victor Manibo. I'm a senior attorney here at Wang Law Office, and I've been with the firm for over 10 years. I've been a lawyer for over 12 years, and I graduated from Cardozo School of Law here in New York. I am licensed to practice in New York and New Jersey generally, but because immigration is federal, I can practice that anywhere in the country. I do immigration litigation, meaning I help non-citizens and defend them against removal proceedings in immigration court. And I also do immigration applications, meaning I help non-citizens apply for status with our various immigration agencies. Aside from being a lawyer, I'm also a science fiction and fantasy writer, and my latest novel is The Sleepless, which came out last year.
Yes, so back to today's topic. Victor, what kind of application does marriage fraud usually happen in?
Many of our immigration benefits are marriage related. People, non-citizens can get status through a U.S. citizen spouse or a lawful permanent resident spouse in very many ways. There's the usual or the most famous or popular marriage-based family petitions, right? There's also derivative asylum applications. If there is an asylee, they can petition for their spouse. There are derivative non-immigrant visa applications. For example, we talked about U visa before. Someone who is a U visa applicant can have a spouse, a wife, or a husband be included in the application. And then that's, through marriage, that person can also get the non-immigrant visa. There are also derivative employment-based applications, same thing as family-based. Someone is petitioned by an employer to get status, and the beneficiary can include the spouse. So somebody can get immigration status through a U.S. citizen or an LPR, and even like applicant for another benefit through marriage. Marriage is also relevant for waivers. We talked about waivers before and how sometimes you need to prove hardship to a qualifying relative, such as a U.S. citizen spouse or an LPR spouse. So marriage comes into that as well. There are a lot of applications where somebody can get status or immigration benefits through a spouse, and because of all of these applications, fraud can happen. Fraud happens just so people can get a waiver or a green card, and that's really what we're going to talk about and discuss today.
So why is it important to know about marriage fraud?
It's important to know about this because USCIS is very strict about marriage fraud. As I mentioned, a lot of applications for immigration benefits are based on marriage. And so they really pay special and close attention to it. They scrutinize everything about a marriage so that they are sure that they're giving immigration benefits to only real marriages. We hear about these stories. These are very common stories about fake marriages, and it happens a lot. I've seen a lot of these, and obviously it's not a good idea to do that. But even if your marriage is real and you're applying for a marriage-based application or petition, it's important to understand this because sometimes a real marriage can be accused by USCIS of being fake. So you have to know how USCIS thinks, how they deal with applications, so that if they wrongly accuse you of fraud, you can defend yourself.
So what is marriage fraud?
Marriage fraud is defined in our statutes, in our immigration laws, and our case law. It's when someone enters into a marriage for the purpose of obtaining immigration benefits or for the purpose of evading immigration laws. So meaning, one, you're trying to get status through marriage, and you only married because you want to get that status. Or two, you're trying to go around immigration laws, evade immigration laws, meaning you're trying to maybe avoid ICE detention or removal. If you marry someone with those goals in mind, and only those goals in mind, that is marriage fraud. These are terms. This is a term that's specifically defined in our law. Now, it takes two people to get married, right? So in this case, it's both people committing fraud. It's not just who is the non-citizen, right? Mm-hmm. So if a U.S. citizen, agrees to, let's say, marry someone for money, so that the other person can get a green card and they get paid for it, both people, the U.S. citizen and non-citizen, are committing marriage fraud. Okay. Marriage fraud happens when two people go through the process of marriage. They apply for a marriage license. They go through a ceremony maybe, or, just sign the paperwork at City Hall or another government building or agency. And they are under the state law. They're married, but really they do not live together. They do not plan to have their lives together as husband and wife, or in same-sex marriages, husband and husband, or wife and wife. Now, this is bad. Obviously, this is bad. Lying to the government is bad. You shouldn't do it. It is dishonest. It's wrong, and it could get you into a lot of trouble.
So what kind of troubles?
So, for example, if USCIS or another agency makes immigration court makes a finding of marriage fraud, you might get deported, your application will be denied, and you will be ineligible for any immigration benefit permanently. So you can't get any other status in the future. You're done. You can't get, a green card, citizenship, non-immigrant visa, even a tourist visa. That's how serious our immigration laws take marriage fraud. And another sign that it's very serious is that marriage fraud is a federal crime. You could go to jail. The max sentence is 5 years in prison, and you can get fined up to $250,000 if you are criminally charged with marriage fraud and found guilty of marriage fraud. It is imposed both on a U.S. citizen and the non-citizen. Like I was saying earlier, it takes two to get married. So it's not just a non-citizen. Even the person with status, even the U.S. citizen or the LPR or someone with NIV status, they can also be convicted of marriage fraud as a federal crime. Now, on top of that, it's also a type of visa fraud, which is a separate federal crime. And so you can be held guilty of both marriage fraud and visa fraud, and those penalties like prison time and fines could stack. So it's very, very serious.
So how do I avoid this kind of trouble?
First of all, don't lie. Don't enter into a relationship only to get immigration status. Don't pay anyone to marry you. Don't lie to immigration about anything, but especially about the nature of your marriage. I keep saying this over and over again. Be honest with immigration. Do not lie. Do not commit immigration fraud. There are severe penalties, especially with immigration fraud, but just in general, it's wrong to do that.
So what if my marriage is real? Am I still at risk of USCIS saying that it's fake?
Yes, like I was kind of mentioning earlier, USCIS might still make mistakes. They're human, and it's their job to make sure that every marriage is legitimate and bona fide. You'll hear that term a lot. Bona fide, that's a Latin term meaning in good faith, entered into in good faith. Now, it's you as the non-citizen, or you and your spouse, as the applicants or petitioners who have to prove that your marriage is real. If USCIS looks at your application or petition and doesn't find enough proof that it's real, or maybe you submitted proof or some facts about your marriage look suspicious, then USCIS might think, oh, this is fraudulent, this is fake. They might deny or they might ask more questions and investigate you. I say this a lot. USCIS, they're human, they make a lot of mistakes. They're not necessarily your adversary, but they have different goals from you sometimes. And so you're not always going to think, oh, they're on our side if I just give the right documents, because they are looking for holes in your case and for potential fraud. And because of their job, sometimes innocent people get caught up in it.
Yes, and we deal with a lot of marriage green card case or with any application related to marriage. So how do I prove that the marriage is bona fide?
Bona fide, like I said, means entered into in good faith. You can prove that your marriage is bona fide if you provide documents with your application or petition that show that you and your spouse live together and hold yourself out as a married couple. Now, how do you do that? What does that mean? How do you show that you have a life together as a couple? First, you have to show that you're actually living together, right? That you have a common address and that you live there. That can usually be proven with mortgage with both your name on it, deeds that have both your name on it, or rental leases that have your names on it, your government IDs, if they show that you both have the same address, mailing address, like on your driver's licenses. Marriage certificates also generally have the spouse's addresses on them, and if it's the same, so that's also proof of cohabitation. You also can show that you are a real marriage by showing that your finances are combined and joint, that you share responsibilities in finances together. You pay the same bills. Your names are both on the electric bill. You have bank accounts that are joint. Your income and your spouse's income both go into the same checking account. You have the same credit cards. Your spouse is an extension credit card holder of your account. Things like that. A really strong way to prove a valid marriage is common children. Of course, if you and your spouse have a child together, the birth certificate of the child lists both your names. That is a really strong proof that, hey, this couple is real. They are raising a child together. That's a huge responsibility. Not a lot of people will have a common child just to get status. So those are a few ways, and usually the strongest ways of proving that marriage is real, is bona fide. If you have those kinds of proofs, USCIS is likely to find that your marriage is real.
So we talk about bona fide. So what kind of suspicious things does USCIS look at to see if the marriage is real?
So sometimes your marriage might be real, but then things kind of look suspicious to USCIS. Sometimes USCIS might think, oh, this person just entered the United States and then got married right away and then got a petition right away. This is probably fake. Sometimes it happens that a person comes into the United States, falls in love, gets married, gets petitioned. It doesn't mean that there's a short time between entering the country and then getting married. It doesn't automatically mean it's fake. But of course, USCIS's job is to think, oh, well, let's see if that's actually real. They just met each other, right? Sometimes if a married couple doesn't have children, they think, oh, is this real, or is it just something for convenience so that they can apply for status? Is it just for immigration benefits? If they don't live together, obviously that's a big red flag, right? Sometimes also it can be about a large age gap. This this older person is marrying this much younger person. USCIS might find that suspicious. Or, two people who are from different racial backgrounds, ethnic backgrounds, who don't speak a common language. USCIS might think, oh, well, then how do they communicate? How are they a married couple if they can't really talk to each other, right? Some of these suspicious questions that USCIS raises might be a little stereotypical. They might even be racist, but that doesn't mean that a marriage is fake just because those things exist, right? Some people, marry a person who is a much older or much younger than them. It doesn't mean it's for some sort of benefit. It doesn't mean it's for status. It doesn't mean it's for, something bad. They might actually love each other. And a lot of couples are in that situation. Obviously, sometimes when there is a previous marriage and there are children involved in that previous marriage, that might also raise some suspicion, but that depends on the circumstances. So if there are things like this that kind of make you think, oh, is USCIS going to look bad on this and think that my marriage is fake, you should really talk to a lawyer. Find someone who is experienced in this, and they will know how to present your circumstances so that you can explain, hey, USCIS, this is real. You might think it looks bad, but it's not bad. It's not fake.
Yeah. So what if in the other situation that is a real marriage, but USCIS think that it's fake? What do they do? And then what can I do?
If USCIS thinks marriage-based petition or application is fake, the most common thing that they do is send out an RFE, a request for evidence. They will ask you for more documents, proof that your marriage is real. In some cases, and this is a bit more severe, they will send out a notice of intent to deny, meaning they are already leaning towards denial, and you have to convince them not to deny it. But the goal is the same. You have to provide them with more proof. Answer the questions that are in the RFE or the NOID about your marriage. Really try to convince them, not just with documents, but sometimes with even legal arguments showing that your marriage is real. Another thing that USCIS can do, they might not send you these documents. They might just ask you at the final stage, at the interview, at the green card interview or the petition I-130 interview. They might ask you questions like, oh, okay, this is very suspicious. Like, why do you have 2 residences and your spouse only has 1 residence? What's that about? So if USCIS suspects anything, they might just spring that on you during the interview, and you might get a little bit surprised. Obviously, USCIS can do all these things at once in a certain case, in a certain application. You might get an RFE, then an NOID, then you might get an interview and get questioned at the interview. And finally, if USCIS thinks your marriage is fake and thinks that they have enough proof to show that your marriage is fake, they're going to deny your application. And then you are going to suffer all the penalties that I mentioned earlier if you have a frivolous marriage finding.
So I heard there is a Stokes interview for I-130 petition, right? What is that?
So a Stokes interview, sometimes it's called something else in different places, but it's basically when a USCIS officer interviews a married couple separately in the context of marriage-based petitions to ask them the same questions and see if they're going to say the same answers when they're separated. They ask a lot of questions that are very specific to the marriage to catch people in a lie or a mistake because they already suspect that the marriage is fake. Now, this is very different from the typical process for marriage-based petitions, where the married couple is in the same room together, asked the same question by the USCIS officer. Here, they're separate, and then they're asked something like where they could give conflicting answers. And that's how USCIS can tell if they're lying about their the reality of their marriage. They ask about biographical information or their family history or how they live at home. I once had a separated interview where the couple was asked, how did you get to this USCIS office? Now, if they were living together and they're a real married couple, obviously they would
come together.
Same place, exactly, and arrive in the same manner. They'll ask, what route did you take? Did you take a car? Did you take a bus? Or they would ask, oh, what side of the bed does your spouse, your wife, sleep in? What side of the bed do you sleep in? Now, if they're really a married couple who lives together, who sleep in the same bed, they should have the same answers, right? It's a very scary thing. It's fortunately rare, but if you are at that point where USCIS is asking you to come in for this kind of interview, sometimes it's for this is a second interview. You should really talk to a lawyer so that you can best present your case. Not lie, obviously, not lie, but so that you can prepare yourself, so you and your spouse can say the truth and not look as suspicious as USCIS thinks you are.
Yeah, and our office also prepared the client for the interview and then have them to be ready for it. What if it is a new marriage and it is real, but we do not have enough evidence to submit to prove it?
So some couples are probably new couples and they don't have, say, the bank statements, the bills, the lease agreement maybe only has the wife's name on it because the husband just moved in, right? And so they don't have a lot of documents that I was talking about earlier where both of their names are there, their married names are there, or maybe the address changes hasn't happened yet, right? And in those situations, these couples might think about maybe waiting to gather more evidence. The longer a couple shares their life together, the more documents showing a bona fide marriage will become available to them, like the bank statements, right? Maybe more photos of their time together as a couple, as spouse and spouse, husband and husband, husband and wife, etc. Also, just the fact that a couple have been married for a longer period of time will help. Like I said earlier, USCIS thinks that couples who got married and then applied for a petition right away can seem a little bit suspicious. So sometimes waiting really is a better strategy. If you have been married for a few years and no one is applying for status, you're not rushing to file a petition with USCIS, then USCIS is more likely to believe, oh, this marriage is not for status. They've been married for 2 years, 5 years, and
even 10 years.
Yeah, and no one's really applying for status. This is probably most likely not fake.
So what if we are gay or lesbian and then it's hard to believe the marriage is real?
No, and I have been mentioning this already. Our immigration laws, immigration benefits are not just for heterosexual couples. And USCIS does grant marriage-based petitions and other marriage-based applications for same-sex couples. And USCIS is forbidden from discriminating against gay couples, lesbian couples. I've never had a bad experience in general. I'm not saying it can't happen, but you might come across a USCIS officer who asks inappropriate questions or homophobic questions. You can talk to a lawyer to see how to handle that particular situation. In general, in my experience, USCIS officers are not discriminating on this basis. I'm not saying that it couldn't happen, but they shouldn't be doing that. And if they do that, talk to a lawyer right away.
So, and the same thing if USCIS seems racist. And why?
Yeah, I mean, USCIS is not allowed to discriminate, and they shouldn't, especially in this kind of job where they're dealing with different kinds of people from different backgrounds or different races. In some cases, USCIS, like I was saying earlier, might think, oh, you and your spouse don't speak the same language. How are you a real married couple? There's an element of racism there, and sometimes also USCIS suspects people who come from certain particular countries as more likely to commit marriage fraud. USCIS has a secret blacklist that immigration lawyers talk about, that it's harder to get approved because USCIS is stricter, or is denies more easily if someone is from this country on a marriage petition. If you again suspect that USCIS has made a racist decision, made the USCIS officer during an interview made a racist comment or anything like that, talk to a lawyer. There are remedies for you.
So what if I do engage in fake marriage? What should I do?
Okay, so this is bad, right? But the answer depends on the status of your case. If you entered into a fake marriage and your petition is already filed and pending, the best way to deal with it is to withdraw, because you should not move forward with a fake application. If you don't have anything yet, do not file it. Obviously, do not file an application based on a fake marriage. In both situations, you should also probably be thinking about divorce.
That's why you need to consult with a lawyer before do any immigration application. What if I file already and then USCIS already denied and then found the marriage fraud? What can I do?
Okay, so in this situation, you went into a fake marriage, you applied, and then USCIS caught you and denied your application. I already talked about what the penalties are, right? No benefits, it could be deported, you could go to prison. You shouldn't appeal it if you lose with USCIS, because it's fake, right? And what are you going to say on appeal? You shouldn't keep pushing it on appeal either. Basically, the best thing you can do is hope for the best that you don't get sent to prison or get deported. But these are the penalties. These are the consequences.
So what if USCIS denied and then found marriage fraud, but my marriage is actually real? What can I do?
If your marriage is actually real and USCIS made a mistake or just accused you without any reason or without enough proof that, your marriage is fake, then you should definitely fight. This is different from the previous question where, well, it is fake. Should I fight it? No, you shouldn't fight it if it's fake. But if it's real, you should fight it because the penalties are so severe. And if you don't fight it, then you will suffer those penalties. So you have to make sure that USCIS makes the right finding and reverses the marriage fraud finding. You can do that on appeal, depending on your application. You might be able to appeal it to the AAO. You might be able to file a motion to reopen in with USCIS, or if this is an immigration judge finding, you can file a motion to reopen or appeal it to the BIA. And for some petitions, you can also go to federal court and contest the marriage fraud finding there. But the bottom line is, if they tell you that your marriage is fake, but it's real and it's real, you should fight it as much as possible. Just reapplying is not enough, because if you don't appeal it, then that stays on your record. And as far as USCIS is concerned, you can't apply for any other benefits because you have that marriage fraud finding.
Wow, it's already in the record. So you need to do something on it.
Right. So
is there a waiver for this if USCIS made the marriage fraud finding?
Yes, there is a waiver under INA 237A1H. It's not something that we can go into detail right now because it's a separate topic, but just know, FYI, for people out there, if somehow USCIS finds a marriage fraud finding against you, you can pursue a waiver. There is a waiver for this, but again, I would advise only pursue the waiver if your marriage is actually real. Don't keep pushing on a case. Don't keep pushing to get status based on a fake marriage.
Yes. So marriage applications are very sensitive. USCIS inspect all those application closely. If you or a family member is involved in such application, it's better to consult with a lawyer who knows how to handle with this matter. We have almost 20-year experience and we know how to guide you for those cases. So if you have more questions, please feel free to leave your question with any of our platform.
And aside from leaving questions, you can also come consult with us. All the things that I said here are based on my legal experience, and they're just my opinion, but they're not legal advice and not legal representation. If you need legal advice or representation, you can contact us through phone, line, email, any of our platforms.
And you can continue follow us on YouTube. We will be back again next week and with another show, Friday at 11 AM EST and AM PST. See you then.
Bye.